Heading to the Maumee or Sandusky River for the first time to fish is a really exciting time frame. But of course, anytime you head into a new place, it's important to understand what's going to work in your favor. The most effective rig in the Maumee today is actually a Carolina rig, which what you need is an inline sinker and a floating jig head. And traditionally, the way that we rig these is we tie an inline sinker to our main line, a leader line, which is traditionally about 18 inches all the way up to 6 foot long. And on the end of that, we'll tie a floating jig head with a grub tail. Medium-sized floating jig heads work the best with a sturdy hook on and usually a 2 to 3 inch tail. When you look at some of these floating jig heads that are very large in size in comparison to others that are very small in size, I tend to find these are too large and these are too small simply because the hook is very fragile and will bend and break. So I like to use a middle-sized floating jig head. Two main styles out there, one with a collar and one without a collar. This is a Northland head. This is a head from Maumee Bait and Tackle. Both of them are pretty effective. The second way to fish is to use lead on lead. This isn't used very often, but it's extremely effective. Oftentimes what we do is we'll tie on, again, an inline sinker, and after that inline sinker, we'll take a small lead head, such as the self. This is an 1/8 or a 1/16. Notice a good size sturdy hook on there, and we'll run that leader line just like we would for a floating jig head. And instead of the floating jig head, we would tie on the lead. So that's what I call the lead on lead. That gives you more feeling when the fish bites when you're running lead on lead. With floating jig heads, you have more of a float feeling or the lack of a bite. The last technique, which was used quite a bit in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, is simply to run a lead head. And although today this gets criticized in the Maumee, it's extremely effective for many fishermen to use. So running just a straight lead head, and lead heads come in more than just a ball size. You can do a stand-up, more of a fish, not quite a lead there, more of a swimmer one. You can use lead that are painted multiple different colors, which can also be effective. Again, in special situations when the fish are very close to the bottom, lead can be very effective. Early season, when there are fish that are close to the bottom, or you just want more of a feeling, that's when you would want to run lead on lead. And then for a majority of the run, you would want to run a Carolina inline sinker. Hopefully, by showing you those 3 techniques and the best ways to fish the Maumee, you'll have some success out there. Remember, all 3 techniques can be extremely effective. The most used was the first one I demonstrated, which is the Carolina with the floating rig. If you have any other questions, feel free to hop over to my website, www.MaumeeRiverWalleyeRun.com. See you on the water.